Welcome to episode 2 of Ask the Misfits. I'm here with Matt Sherburne and Drew Crandall at Misfit HQ in Portland, Maine. Gonna answer your questions from this week. We got a long list of them. We're gonna tear through them. Before we start, Drew, what you got?
I'm gonna go right into the questions.
What?
The very first question from Instagram is from @MFSherb. He says,
Him?
Drew, where did you get that amazing Team Misfit jacket? And I'm like, I got it because I work for Misfit Athletics, but you could get it.
I need a job. Can I have a job?
No,
Definitely not.
absolutely not. But you could get it on Black Friday.
Oh, okay.
Special edition Black Friday. It's gonna be on sale right when it drops.
It's pretty sweet.
So does that answer your question?
Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it.
The next question on Instagram was
Black
from
Friday.
Coach Tackett. When programming for the blog, do you dive into a lot of Scientology? I don't believe that's what you meant to say, maybe it is. Of the sport, or do you mainly look to focus on specific movements, strengths, and focuses, example, aerobic, anaerobic, lactate threshold, VO2 max, etc.? Or is it mainly specific ideas of movements and standards?
Well, since we've been using this video series as a way to pick on people, I just have to ask like how the word Scientology even gets typed out into this.
The autocorrect.
Well, okay, so that's fine.
Maybe
but that means
maybe
that this
scientific?
person is using Scientology in another thing because that's not what would be autocorrected first. So is this person a fan of L. Ron Hubbard? Is he like David Miscavige? Is he just a Tom Cruise fan? I don't know.
Tom Cruise fan for sure.
David Miscavige, if you're watching this, I publicly challenge you to a fist fight. Keep going.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Anyways,
I mean,
where do we go
that
from there?
was dangerous. Okay.
One-on-one, though.
It's-
1v1.
No
goons.
Yeah,
no goons.
He doesn't play that. The question. Let me see if I can actually get to what the question is now. Dive into the science, we'll say, of the sport, or do we look at specific movements, strengths, and focuses, such as anaerobic? Okay. Well, first off, in the sport, while those things are at play, your aerobic capacity, your anaerobic threshold, your VO2 max, they're all at play. They're being trained in the different domains and tests and training, and just the methodology of CrossFit already has it built in. So while we can hit specifics when it comes to playing with VO2 max or lactate threshold and things of that nature, unless you're working one-on-one with an athlete, you wouldn't really get to implement that as effectively as you could. No, you would be able to one-on-one, as opposed to being able to implement it to the masses. So I can't have specifics for 10,000 people that come to get the website every day, the workouts off the website. I wouldn't know where they need to work and what windows they need to be in to maximize their training. So that would be something that's very specific to that person. These things are at play, but it's more along the lines of what the demands are of the sport. So like, what sort of things are coming up, what sort of tests, what style of test, is it longer distance? If it is, I know I'm working more aerobic. Is it shorter sprints? Do I need to build someone's capacity to sprint? Then it's a mix, possibly, of some VO2, depending on how long the sprint is, but definitely lactate threshold. That stuff comes up all the time. That's why we have interval work. That's why we have bitch work. That's why we have long metcons. That's why we sprinkle skills in there. So you don't need to worry about these things necessarily as long as you are hitting multiple domains of the
They're
sport.
like interesting and whatnot. I think
They're interesting.
Like what VO2 max is interesting to find out what your VO2 max is, but
Sure.
they're not testing. They're not hooking athletes up to gas masks and say, all right, whoever's at the highest VO2 is the fittest in the sport right now. That's not how it
And
works.
in the sport, while that could be a predictor of how well you could do in certain events, it doesn't predict how well you're going to do when you mix skills and movements like that in there.
Yeah,
Just
They're
doesn't.
very standardized to like sitting on a stationary bike or doing a treadmill on an incline. They're not designed to do ski erg sprints and then
It may be a good predictor of who's
burpees.
going to win the run, swim, run at the games, but it's not a great predictor of who's going to win.
Yeah, or
like,
I'm thinking like
Amanda 45.
like
it's just
Kalipa
not.
doing the half marathon row. That he's got a very high VO2 max.
Right.
It's indicative that he's gonna do well in that, but doesn't necessarily mean he does. He can have a mental breakdown. Like there's just so many things that play.
An individual would have to know their numbers, would have to test their own blood, would have to get their mask hooked up. They'd have to do all that to be able to truly implement that sort of training. And so what we do is just allow you to hit the intensity or the lack thereof, depending on the style that the piece is created in.
Well-rounded program
Hits it all.
already goes there.
Yep.
Yeah. Strong Cup of Joe wants to know, why can't Travis M.F. Williams carry 160-pound farmer's handles when he used to carry Whataburger bags heavier than that? Boom roasted. At Dex Hopkins, please respond. Dex Hopkins is not here. Is 160-pound farmer's handles too heavy?
No.
Okay. Boom, you suck.
He had the heavy
He used
kettlebells.
203-pound kettlebells or something like that yesterday,
Yeah,
right?
176.
Oh,
He's the 176
so-
kettlebells. The kettlebell grips are a little
Way
heavier, or the grips are fatter, and the weight is more condensed. It's much more difficult to balance than having that long lever.
I
So
agree.
There you go.
carry on.
Boom.
A Beaten 1, do you guys have any advice on nutrition for people who are looking to put on a little size? Thank you. Guys are awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Guys.
Matt, for being awesome.
So, when you're trying to put on size, you have to take into consideration that trying to lose weight, eating for performance, eating for size, eating for aesthetics, all these different things sort of have their own path. So if you do try to put on size, you are going to need to eat meals that are mixing high levels of all three macronutrients. Whereas a performance diet, you would try not to, once you're refeeding your carbohydrates, put fat in there, because the glucose uptake is going to be a little bit harder to get into your muscles. So if you're mixing fat and carbohydrate at a high number together, which is some pretty delicious food combinations.
Sounds like pizza, nachos, and wings with rice and stuff.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
yeah.
That's in my
I don't
head.
know if
That's where I'm going.
I don't know
That's where
if
I'm
I
going.
would.
Okay. Well, anyway.
So you got to mix those. And essentially what that means, you got to eat a lot of food. But in terms of actually putting weight on that will stay, carbs and fat at the same time. Now, again, not advocating that for
The masses.
for performance, for losing weight, anything like that. He specifically asked how to gain weight, carbs and fat together, keep your protein high.
Sounds so good.
It'll happen, yeah. Pizza diet. It's Kenzie Riley asks, when farmers carries are programmed as strongman strength work, should you be wearing grips or not? ... asking for a friend.
I feel like as long as you're not wrapping around the implement, use them like a strap.
I find it to be way easier.
It's the classic example of what is the point. So if the point is you're trying to build grip strength and trying to build grip
it as hard
endurance,
as you can.
then you don't use straps. You work the grip endurance. If your grip's really good, but you're trying to go fast or trying to
overload.
go super
Yeah.
heavy and the grip's a limiting factor and you're trying to put a greater load in your body, then you use straps and you lift a shit ton of weight and you move a huge amount of weight a long way. So it depends what you're trying to do. Kenzie, you already know that, Kenzie.
And this is actually the first time that we've had husband and wife back-to-back questions that did not combine their name into one social media handle. So that's a first on the Ask the Misfits. Roy Riley 9113, can you toss out some scaling / sub option examples? Example, if you have no yoke, ... If you don't have a 200-pound sandbag, ...
What you got?
I mean, personally, just try to mimic the stimulus as best you can. So, if you don't have a sandbag, you can take 2 45-pound plates, hug them against your chest, and carry those, or 3. I mean, if you can figure out a way to hold them comfortably. I mean,
Metal
seen it.
plates.
metal plates.
Pinch your nipple and
Well, if you don't have farmer's carries, take a 45-pound plate, pinch between your hands, walk with that.
But the yoke.
Put a heavy barbell on your shoulders, right? Be careful about how you do it.
If you get hurt, it's not our fault.
You have the same
Keep going.
dynamic as a heavy yoke where you have a heavy stimulus on your shoulders and you're walking with it. The fact that it's not hanging towards the floor isn't really going to change the dynamic that much. So
One PT exercise that I did that I felt mimicked that a lot was the barbell on the back with the bands and the kettlebells, and you actually
Love to do
create
that.
the shake on purpose, and then
Yep.
you march in place. So you go side
okay.
to side. And mine was really light, and I had to hold my knee up. But I feel like if you just sort of had a little bit of a pause back and forth, that you'd get that same kind of feeling here. Whereas the barbell's
Stability,
not
yeah.
gonna,
Yep.
it's not gonna do that same thing.
Makes
And
sense.
again, if you're trying to overload, you probably try to make it a little more stable, less of the bands. If you're working on stability, less load, more bands,
Yeah.
more instability.
Drake Webster, Misfit Athletics. When it comes to the blog programming, is the whole thing designed to be done in 2 sessions or one really long session? I currently do most, if not all, in one session. Just wanted to make sure the stimulus isn't being stunted. Thank you guys for the awesome videos and programming.
We get this question everywhere we go all the time. 2 sessions is probably perfect world, best case scenario for everything. Your lifestyle, your training. If that's what you're able to do and you have an income that allows you to hit the gym for 90 minutes to 2 hours in the morning and 90 minutes to 2 hours in the evening, you can then custom tailor the pieces to probably being the most effective and give you the most bang for your buck. It's just not reasonable for most people. The blog work can be done to the dose that you need within a 2 hour, maybe 2.5
most
hour
people,
window. Yeah, for most people. and it can be done. You just need to make sure that you're getting enough break between pieces to be able to hit the next piece with intensity. When that breaks down and you feel like you're just kind of going through the movements at that point, that next piece may be kind of a lost cause anyway. So
the only thing I'd add to what you just said is that there are times of the year, regionals, CrossFit Games, and this is for the higher level athletes that have that skill of being able to warm up, work out, cool down, and repeat. Like, that needs to be a skill you have. So, you don't move your hand.
Nothing.
Good.
yeah, it does, just not to the point where it's beating you into the ground.
Not every day, but like every once in a while, you should have that skill being able to warm up, work out, cool down, and repeat.
There's definitely a line that you walk.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thomas Ray Woods at Misfit Coach. That's me if you want to give me a follow on Instagram. Will the vlog be back for the Open? That could be a good time. I've started a few episodes, and I can tell you that what we got going on here, especially without Cody, no offense to the people who are here, not that interesting. So we want to make sure that when we bring the vlog back, it's actually interesting. Otherwise, I'm going to be talking to you while I'm driving down the highway. Then we'll make fun of Sherb a little bit, and then the day will be over, and that'll be it. So the Open could be a good time, but we'll try to bring it back.
True that.
CF stomping ground. How would you advise a Masters athlete to do your programming? That's an intriguing question.
I got the answer. Yeah. I got the answer. We have this thing on the website. It's called the Masters Program. And it's going to work pretty good. And if you subscribe to that tier, which gets you the Masters Program, you have access to a Facebook group, which is led by Gabe, who is a master currently competing at a very high level, who can give you a lot of advice. So our Masters Program is not just a program, but it puts you into kind of a community, into a circle where you get really a lot for being a part of it.
And
so,
consultation.
Consultation,
every cycle, talk
every
about
cycle,
your strengths and weaknesses.
all kinds of stuff. So we don't want to just put a program out there. We want to make sure we give you as much ability to get the most out of it as possible. So our Masters Program, that's our best advice. Everything is kind of in that.
Mike Boff.
Simple.
Is mock regionals happening this year? I feel like it usually pops up early in December, and I haven't heard anything yet. Mike, we have some terrible news for you. There will be no mock regionals this year. Are you toying with the idea of programming a mock regionals-esque type thing into the blog that's not scored?
I wasn't, but it's not a terrible idea. We'll talk more after this. I'm up for it. But
the competition aspect with everything wasn't quite what it needed to be. And until we are 100% positive that it will be what it needs to be, it'll either not happen or be some sort of free thing that you can just jump in on the blog.
And quite frankly, some people know, some people don't. Misfit HQ has been crammed into a tiny office space up above our CrossFit MF gym in Portland. We're in the middle of transitioning to a huge brand new facility, custom built for us. So instead of checking leaderboards and doing all that, we will be hauling equipment across town and setting up offices and building a studio to give you guys some really good content over the next year. So once we get over that hump, we'll have a lot more free time for you guys.
Daweed CF. At Misfit Athletics, 2 weeks of testing in a row, retest and then test week, usually wrecks me. Too much competing versus training. I really like the fun/off week we had once or twice this year in between. Any thoughts or plans to change the structure of the program?
Well, this is kind of, there's a couple other questions like this too. So the test-retest was originally designed to service 2 points. One, the volume would be significantly lower so that you could put some intensity into the few lifts or tests or pieces you had to do that week. And the lower volume should allow your central nervous system and muscles and everything else to recover over that 2-week period where you're doing about 60% of the normal volume. When we backed it down, what happened is we got this huge backlash and outcry that said there's no volume on the blog, I need more, so I'm going to do my own pieces. And that happened so much that I just started adding in an extra piece. Sometimes it's an accessory test, sometimes it's an extra bitch work piece. It's not crazy, the volume's still significantly lower than other times, but people are really beating the shit out of themselves now during their time where they're supposed to be backing down the volume. And they are going to get that to some degree anyway, because when you're testing, you really let it all hang out because you feel like you have something to care about, your own scores,
improve,
your own PRs, trying to improve. So I have toyed with the idea this year. I didn't pull the trigger on it for a number of reasons, mostly because of the way the competition schedule lined up. But I toyed with the idea of writing just 3 cycles for you guys for the whole year instead of the 4th cycle that leads into the Open, because it would allow us to put 1 week before cycle 1, which we did kind of a little bit, a week between cycle 1, cycle 2, and a week between cycle 2 and cycle 3, and then start Open programming basically 2 weeks prior to the Open to give you guys that might be something that's implemented next year. For now, use test week as a deload week. All my remote clients deload during test week. If they need to take time off, we test the things that we find to be most important to them, and we give them other time off or change things and make it simpler. There's no perfect way to do this for the masses, so we're going to continue to try to structure this to give you guys those sort of opportunities to rest, but it's not always as easy as it seems. So.
I find it's best to pick the 1 or 2 things in retest week that I thought I really should improve on, or I really focused on the entire cycle, and that's essentially what I would do. Like maybe not 2 or 3, but not every single piece. And then you can get a chance to, do those things that you care about, and then recover for, the following week where you're testing for a new cycle.
Boom.
Yeah.
Now we are on to questions from the blog. Every Tuesday night, we post a little photo on the blog for the Ask the Misfits, like we do on Instagram. So if you want to use that to ask your questions, misfitathletics.com. Question is from Sarah Josh McMahon. I have been following the blog for a few months now, but I travel for work a few times a week. Would you suggest missing that day and picking up when I get back in town, or use it a rest day and pick it back up? I tend to get behind on workouts and then stress out, LOL. I know dumb. I know dumb. That's kind of funny, because, okay. I know dumb, but I know others that have the same issue. Any advice would be helpful. Honestly, this is one of those situations where you don't, I think, ever want, especially once you get into the 2-day territory, to try to backtrack and figure things out. Unless you plug and play 1 or 2 pieces, damn it, I really wanted to hit that one, and you want to throw one out. Do not try to cram a bunch of work into a short period of time, or to obsess over what happened in the past that you missed, because as we move forward throughout the year, the whole point of the cycles and everything we're doing is that you're current so that it lines up with the Open. So from my point of view, don't stress out about it too much. And if you are missing, a lot of times Tuesday will be the day that we clean and jerk and you really need to work on it, but you're missing Tuesdays, just slide that in for another lift.
Yeah. Boom, roasted.
Got him. Matthias Cuba. My thrusters and handstand push-ups are really lacking compared to the rest of my movements, aka I'm weak as f at these 2. It says AF, but yeah, it's cool. That'll probably get bleeped out anyways. There was an article you guys wrote about rowing where it said that the best way to overcome a weakness is by practicing it as frequently as possible. I'm wondering, how can I practice these 2 glaring weaknesses of mine without overloading my shoulders and ruining the programming? I already did a cycle of strict press weakness template without the success of either movement. I did PR my strict press. However, strict press template, strict press PR, I like it. I also work on my mobility on a daily basis. So thrusters and handstand push-ups could not be more different in terms of what is going to happen to your central nervous system. Yep. Going overhead, there's if you go back into all the Russian training manuals that they have, that weightlifting hipsters love to read, they essentially say to press, you must press. Press, 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 press. It doesn't do shit to your central nervous system. We don't have a ton of slow twitch fibers in our upper body because we don't walk around all day on our arms, our hands. So you can keep practicing because you're not going to overload yourself. So pressing, handstand holds, handstand push-ups, all that stuff. The other thing that I can say about the handstand push-up, it's one of those movements where if you're not doing it properly, it doesn't matter how good your mobility is, it doesn't matter how strong you are, what stability you've built. If you can't get into the right positions and move properly, you're kind of screwing yourself over.
That's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. So thrusters, that's one of those things. That would be one of those things where I would grab a barbell 4 or 5 times a week and just hammer some out in a warm-up.
You can put that in your rep accumulation warm-up almost
so
every
easy.
day. There's really no better movement than the thruster to get your whole body ready to do whatever that we're asking you to do.
I've used that with a few athletes here who are like, hey, was it 16.5, all the thrusters killed me. And it's like, all right, well, I'll have to do thrusters. When they come on workouts, well, you need to get a little more volume in. So and I'm not saying go crazy, don't do 100 every single day, but doing, you know, like you said, 3 sets of 15 or, you know, vary the weights, getting comfortable with that movement is huge. And the biggest thing I'd say for someone that's trying to improve them is making sure that you're using your hips. Like we see a lot of teachers at our camp now, people pressing too early with their arms, burning out their shoulders and wondering why they can't do thrusters anymore. Be sure that you're moving properly and then address some of the other issues like getting enough volume with that movement.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that people are so used to doing thrusters when they're lightweight that they don't understand that hip extension, that quarter extremity sort of concept behind it. So you start pressing 95, then you start pressing 115, then you start pressing early 135, and you run out and you can't figure out why you're having issues. So make sure your thrusters with an empty bar look like your thrusters with 225. Like it has to be the same pattern.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where like, what's that? Handstand,
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Woo!
Good call.
Handstand push-up template. We are currently taking photos and dolling it up a little bit, so it's a nice presentation for you guys. But that's done, and that will be available on the site in cycle 3.
Yeah.
Gavin Guard. What would you guys suggest to do if I get an awful headache every time I do handstand walks, handstand push-ups? Don't give me a problem. It's got to be that neck crank, right? Because you're doing this to try to find out where you're going.
I used to get the same thing when I front squatted because I would emphasize this position so much that I would crank my neck back, and I used to have like a pinched nerve, and it would give me crazy pressure headaches. I had to stop working out. Thing that fixed it was just some chiropractic visits. A couple times, 2 or 3, they adjusted my neck. I never had pain again after that.
Thinking too, if you can work on your thoracic extension, getting your arms over your head, that you're not cranking into this position, not only with your neck but with your upper back. It's not often we see, not uncommon we see athletes walking on their hands. They get down, they're beat red, and they can't breathe. You need to be able to breathe while you do that movement. So playing with your positioning is going to be huge too, along with maybe addressing some ability.
And we've got, give a profile view. How much are we doing this kind of thing on our cell phones and whatever? And that's just 2-3 minutes a day with you can buy the 2 lacrosse balls, but I like that mobility wad one better. That nice. Like digs into your muscles.
The Pinot?
Gemini?
Or
yes.
It's got the pointy edges.
Yeah. That one really digs into your C spine, T spine, like that area, and that can help a lot. Eric Hudson. Even with more and more focus being put into my pre and post workout body maintenance, I've been feeling pretty wrecked lately. Lately, I've been passing on the chosen work based off weaknesses pieces and been implementing more bodybuilding, light unilateral work to focus on imbalances and to decrease load on my body. Thoughts? Thanks. There's 2 things to look at here. Number 1, you can do a lot for yourself with accessory movements where we're adding some time under tension at really light weights. So I don't necessarily call that bodybuilding. It'd be more like physical therapy style kind of stuff.
Rehab.
Just to make sure that it's not taking away from your programming. Probably the biggest thing though, I hate to be a dick, but you're probably under recovering. That's the biggest thing that I see in that first sentence is like you have to match your training load with what you're trying to do to make sure that you can come out the other side and crush it again the next day. And if that's not a priority, but you increase volume or you increase intensity, you're going to be in trouble. So,
I mean, some people do thrive on lower volume. I don't know necessarily that the bodybuilding or unilateral work it's definitely not hurting, probably.
Yeah.
But as far as your acceleration as a CrossFit athlete, it's probably not doing a ton. It may be helpful for injury prevention down the road, things like that. As far as what it's going to do for your game as a CrossFit athlete and your performance, it just feels like you're putting that in maybe because, like Drew said, you're under recovering and you're not able to come back and hit the sprints on the rower, or you're not able to work the skill work and the accessory stuff instead. Skill, if you ask me, doing the lower intensity skill work versus doing the bodybuilding unilateral stuff in our sport specifically, the skill work makes more sense 9 out of 10 times. Having said that, for longevity's sake, you're probably doing yourself a big favor by balancing everything out and things like that. So again, it depends on what your immediate goals are, long-term goals are, and where you kind of fit that in. There's definitely a place for it. You just got to make sure that things are lining up right.
And it's also weird how you look at recovery, because a lot of people would think, okay, so I got to flush a little bit more, or I have to use a foam roller or this or that, but it's also could be like, are you eating like a super high inflammatory diet or something
like lifestyle stuff? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you doing all those type of things?
So
Like,
you
the
have
little
to
things
make
outside.
sure if you're trying to figure out if you're under recovered or not, that you expand your focus.
You realize
Essentially,
that-
anything that you do outside of the gym, could any of it be?
Tick in one direction, tick in the other direction. You're helping yourself, you're hurting yourself.
Yep.
So every decision has to
Every
be
decision.
thought in that line.
Totally.
Okay, so I'm under the impression that this is essentially the version of Peter from the United States. It's spelled Piotr. So I'm going to call you Peter. If it's not Peter, I apologize. Peter Kozlowski asks, what's your concept behind developing muscle endurance for the sport for someone that is very strong with strict movements but struggle big time with holding on to the bar? What should be his or her approach to the blog and individual pieces to change that?
The bar, that means a barbell?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
This hits home with me because this is me.
Well, is it you for the same reasons, though, is the question.
It could be a lot of people who come into the sport. This to me looks like it's probably an upper body thing. I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't be if we're talking about strict movements.
Sure.
So if it's an upper body thing, a lot of people come in with a lot of fast twitch upper body, really strong upper body, but strong for one strict press. Don't ask me to do 7, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And that will pass on to the same type of person that can bang out strict muscle ups, but then isn't so great at holding onto the bar for like a big set of toes to bar or chest to bar. You have to be able to some way.
Hang on. So you think it's the same thing with holding onto a pull-up bar and holding onto a barbell? You think those go hand in hand with someone like this?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Carry on.
So you have to be able to create time under tension somehow. If you aren't creating it because like Sherb could do hang power cleans for, I don't know, probably a minute longer than I could at any given weight. If we were like, okay, here's 135, just go, see what happens. So if I'm not getting the same time under tension, then he's growing exponentially faster than I am in terms of getting the stimulus. So you have to create a scenario where you have a lighter weight and you're able to go through that, maybe less reps, or take it completely outside of your training and work on grip strength.
Accessory stuff, yeah.
Accessory stuff lets you decide where you're scaling it so that you can go back into the sport and be a little bit better. But for me, you have to be able to create time under tension because you're not going to be able to create it under intensity. So.
Right, yeah. So it doesn't do you any good, basically, to do singles, doubles, and triples if you're supposed to be doing sets of 15
yeah, if
to
it's
20.
if it's already your strength,
right.
You're not doing anything for yourself. You just essentially...
The other thing I'll add, if we were talking specifically holding onto a bar, one, I mean, I'm sure you're hook gripping, or I assume you're hook gripping. If you're not, hook grip. Some people can, some people can't. 2, grip on pull-up bar is always questionable with about 9 out of 10 CrossFit athletes. No one ever grips correctly. Yeah, pinky knuckle up over the top, thumb wrapped around. You can actually build grip strength a lot faster if you're actually gripping correctly.
With all your fingers.
Yeah, with all your fingers.
That meaty grip is like the biggest game changer in terms of the very first time I was watching some random YouTube video and a gymnast said pinky knuckle on top. My toes to bar were like doubled. One set was doubled just by doing that because this like muck on and hope you can stay there just doesn't work.
You can feel the tension when you grip on like that. It makes a big difference. You can push and pull and pull ups in, toes to bar
shoulder in
much
a better
faster.
position to just upstream and downstream.
Yeah, so a few things to think about there.
Last but not least, Jared Kate asks, should the beginning of a cycle feel easier than the end of a cycle? What kind of stimulus should I be feeling throughout? Does that change cycle to cycle? And is it consistent?
I feel like this
year
changes too between conditioning and how the lifting feels.
Sure does.
Because the beginning of the cycle.
No one has ever said that the beginning of the cycle felt easier than the end. Every time we switch cycles, everyone has a meltdown for a full week.
So
you tried to kill me, it's different, it's whatever.
To me, it's the lifting is like, all right, I'm getting the hang of it. We just tested it now. It's time to kind of retool and fix it. And then you're like, oh, fuck. Like this conditioning feels like it's a totally different sport than I was just playing for the last, 6-7 weeks. So I think that, it's a hard question to answer because the conditioning might feel hard at first, then you kind of feel the groove of what that cycle is going to feel like, and then it still sucks because you still have to do all that work. But that first week or so, you're like, holy crap, like this is a slap in the face.
But on the other side of the coin, percentages on lifts are much lower.
Yeah,
so you're hitting your lifts consistently.
Do this.
Yeah, exactly. So you switch. You get comfortable with the style of conditioning. You get comfortable with the demands. But the lifts, if you're not doing them correctly early on, get exponentially more challenging, especially if you're not getting stronger, because you're able to kind of just slide your way through the lesser percentages and not worry about actually getting stronger when you're doing that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's one answer.
I just think flip-flops.
I think the next three, is it three? The next three questions that are built into that all sort of have the same answer. Because it's what kind of stimulus should I feel in a cycle? Does it change cycle to cycle? And is it consistent year to year? Number one, we do an entire podcast on what the stimulus is for each cycle.
Right.
So you can go back into YouTube if you're just like, oh, I want to figure out what cycle 1 and cycle 2 were. Cycle 3 podcast will be coming up here pretty soon.
That's right.
Does that change cycle to cycle? That will. Ted just changed Ted's behind the camera. He just changed his schedule. We're going to need to figure that out.
Better shoot that.
Thank you, Jared, for reminding us. Does that change cycle to cycle? Will also be answered. And is that consistent year to year? Yes, in a very macro view and a micro view. When we're breaking it down, a lot of it has to do with how the sport's progressing.
Yeah.
And how that goes. So general concepts, yes, but like the nitty gritty, probably not.
Correct. Yeah. Boom, roasted, Jared.
Yeah. You know what? I think that's it for Ask the Misfits.
That's gotta be it.
Remember, sharpentheaxecode.com.
Don't forget.
For this special edition
Starts when?
Black Friday. 12:01 a.m.
Yeah.
Thursday night, Friday morning,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call that. I don't think that's Friday morning. I think that's a lie.
Thursday.
That was fun. We'll
Nice.
see you guys next week.